In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what rep ranges work best for muscle growth by doing three things. 1. Show you exactly what research supports on this topic by presenting the results of more than 50 studies, which I will link in the description. 2. Explain how these results translate to real life and how they can be extremely misleading if you don't truly understand them. And 3. Present 9 factors that affect the rep ranges at which you should train based on your individual needs. So, by knowing the results of science, some critical thoughts on these results, and the 9 factors that affect rep ranges, you'll be able to structure the ideal program for you. Let's dive in. First, I need to make sure that everyone is on the same page with some basics. So, in case you don't know, reps have an inverse relationship with load. The heavier you lift, the fewer reps you can do, and we usually see the correlation between load and reps that is presented on this graph. For example, most people could do around 6 reps with 80% load of their 1 rep max, or 12 reps with around 70% of their 1 rep max. And 1 rep max is the maximum load you can lift for 1 rep. Now, on this piece of information, it is important to know 2 things. 1. This number varies between individuals. One might be able to do 6 reps at 80%, whereas another one might be able to do 7. And 2. The same percentages of 1 rep max can lead to different number of reps in different exercises and muscle groups. For example, a study from 2012 found that participants could do 30 to 40 reps on the leg extension with 30% of their 1 rep max load. But in another study from 2018, authors found that participants could do 60 to 80 reps on the bicep curls at the same percentage. So keep in mind that although this graph is a good point of reference, in practice there may be differences between one person to the other or one exercise to the other. Now that we got the basics out of the way, let's see exactly what was proven by science, starting from the high rep range. So can you build muscle by training with 20% or less of your maximum load, which equals to 40 or more repetitions per set? On this rep range, there are 3 studies worth mentioning. The first one is by Buckner and colleagues in 2020. They compared 4 sets of bicep curls to failure either with 15 or 70% load. This was equivalent to 90 reps vs 10 reps. The results showed that the 15% load wasn't sufficient to produce similar hypertrophy with a 70% load. So 90 reps didn't look to be as effective as 10 reps for stimulating muscle growth. However, in 2018 study, the results were different. In this study, they had a similar design where they compared 15% with 70% loads, but this time on the leg extensions. Surprisingly, they found similar results in hypertrophy in the 2 conditions. So this study suggests that even training with as little as 15% load, which equals to 80 to 90 reps per set, can produce similar hypertrophy gains with 10 reps per set. Now, the differences between these 2 studies can be attributed to the fact that they examined different types of exercise and muscle groups. One study examined the effects on the quadriceps while the other one on the biceps. But things get a little clearer by a third and probably the most well-designed study of the 3. In this 2018 study, they had subjects train with 20, 40, 60 and 80% of their 1 rep max, both in the bicep curls and the leg press. After 12 weeks of training for 2 sessions per week, the 20% group had significantly fewer hypertrophy gains than the other 3 conditions. One additional difference of this study with the previous 2 is that the subjects trained for a total of 12 weeks instead of 8 weeks. This is another reason why the findings of this study are more compelling, because we always want to see the effects of the conditions that we examine on larger periods of time. So 2 of the 3 studies have shown that training with loads of 20% or less, which means more than 40 repetitions, doesn't provide equal hypertrophy gains as training with more moderate weights. And of course, we all know that it's far from practical to train between 40 and 90 reps per set. However, from an exercise science standpoint, it's good to see evidence of how light is too light for hypertrophy, and this looks to be from 20% load and less. Now, what about the 25 to 35 rep range? Well, if we go heavier than 20 to 15% load, the evidence becomes clearer, but the conclusions of this evidence become harder. But let me explain this. Over 42 studies have shown that if you train hard enough on each set, any rep range between 6 to even 35 reps, or in other words 80 to 30% load, can be equally effective for muscle hypertrophy. and remember the line equally effective. This was exactly the conclusion of 2 meta-analyses on the topic. For those that don't know, meta-analysis is the highest quality of evidence that we can have in science. However, does this equally effective mean that you can train anywhere within these ranges and get optimal results? Well, no. In real life, you can neither use any of these rep ranges as your sole practice to optimize muscle growth, nor randomly combine a variety of rep ranges and expect the optimal results. And why is that? Well, that's because sometimes there is a big difference between what can be proven in a study and what could work in real life. And this makes the conclusions of these studies misleading if they are directly communicated to people that have no experience with weight training. Let me explain exactly what I mean by presenting as an example a study from 2015 that compared 25 to 35 reps with 8 to 12 reps and found them equally effective for muscle growth. In this study, they had 18 trained men divided into 2 experimental groups, one that trained with 8 to 12 reps and another with 25 to 35 reps per set. They trained 3 times per week for 8 weeks, and the results after that period showed that both groups had similar hypertrophy gains. So this leads many people to believe that 30 reps are equally effective for muscle growth as 10 reps. However, although these results are valuable for exercise science, it is not something that you can directly implement to your program as your sole practice. First, according to the author of this paper, a significant portion of the participants in his study in the 25 to 35 rep group experienced a great deal of discomfort. Many participants were vomiting during training. This type of discomfort when training with high reps has been also observed by a 2017 study by Fisher and co-workers. This discomfort occurs because a 35 rep set needs more than a minute of continuous work to be completed. The energy demands for such activities are covered by the lactic anaerobic energy system. This system creates some byproducts that lower the pH of the blood plasma and makes you feel like garbage. So I'd really like to see your thoughts on this in the comments. If both 12 and 35 reps are equally effective for muscle hypertrophy, but you have to exhaust yourself or even vomit every time you train with the 35 reps, do they seem equally effective to you as practices? And this is only the start. Another big drawback of training with 25 to 35 reps per set is that you need a lot more time in the gym. Take a look at the following calculations to see how different 2 sessions can be. In the study I presented, they did 7 exercises of 3 sets per session, so 21 sets in total per session. To finish a workout like this with the 8 to 12 reps, you'd need around 47 minutes, while with 25 to 35 reps, around 61 minutes. And this is if you use the same duration of rest intervals between sets. However, in real life, you'll need at least 1 more minute of rest intervals between sets in the 25 to 35 reps condition. So you probably end up doing the same workout in 81 minutes. But it gets even worse. You see, in the study I presented, they only trained chest, shoulders, and legs for 9 sets per week. What if they did something more commonplace in hypertrophy training, like 20 or 15 sets per week on the same muscle group? To quickly do the math for you, if you were to train every main muscle of your body for 15 sets per week, which is a normal volume for hypertrophy, you would need at least 10 muscle groups times 15 sets, which equals to 150 sets per week. This would result in 6 sessions of 58 minutes with 10 reps, but 1 hour and 40 minutes per session with 30 reps per set, assuming that you'll need 1 minute more rest on the 30 reps condition. So you'll need 4 more hours of training per week on the 30 reps condition to get the same results. Does this sound like all rep ranges are equally effective for muscle growth? In addition, there are 5 more reasons that this higher rep range is not equally effective with moderate rep ranges for muscle hypertrophy. 1. When you train at higher rep ranges, you get less strength gains. This was also proven by the 2 meta-analyses that I presented earlier. 2, at least 4 studies that I'm aware of have shown that training with more repetitions and for a longer time in general generates more central fatigue, which can inhibit your overall performance. 3, as was shown by a 2017 study, training with higher rep ranges close to failure takes longer to recover from session to session compared to lower rep sets. This could potentially lead to fewer training sessions per given training period and reduced results. 4. Two studies that I am aware of have shown that your ability to tell when you're truly approaching failure gets worse the more repetitions in a set you do. So you can estimate your intensity of effort better the less repetitions you do in a set. And 5. When training with high rep ranges, to ensure you're activating and training enough fibers, you have to get through the initial junk volume and eventually reach adequate proximity to failure. On certain exercises like the squat and the deadlift, the central fatigue is so high that it's simply not worth it and it will decrease your performance for the rest of your session. So yes, science have shown some interesting results, but I really think that saying that all rep ranges are equal for hypertrophy is a bad way to communicate the results of these studies to people that have no experience in the gym. The actual utility of the results of these studies on the 25 to 35 rep range and the way that I think they should be communicated to the people is that if for any reason you have to train on the 25 to 35 rep range, you could stimulate hypertrophy if you train close to failure on every set. And not that 25 to 35 reps are equally effective with moderate rep ranges, because they're not. Now, what about lower rep ranges? Back to the rep range graph, we already saw that less than 20% loads will probably not work at all, and 25 to 35 reps are far from optimal for many reasons. This may lead you to believe that 20 to 6 reps are optimal for muscle growth, since the two meta-analyses I presented earlier concluded that reps below 6 are not equally effective for hypertrophy. However, I'm aware of at least 5 studies that found similar hypertrophy between 3 to 5 reps and moderate repetitions around 10. So what is really happening on the rep range below 6? First, can you build muscle with 1 rep maxes? The only worth mentioning study that I found on this topic is by Mattock and co-workers in 2017. In this study, they had 17 untrained men and 21 untrained women divided into 2 groups. One group did 8 to 12 reps for 4 sets with 90 seconds rest, and the other group worked its way to 1 rep max in every session. They trained 2 times per week for 8 weeks. The results showed that the 1 rep max condition produced significantly less gains in muscle hypertrophy compared to the 8 to 12 reps. And I think that this is something that we could all agree. 1 rep maxes are not suitable for muscle hypertrophy for many reasons. However, if we move slightly higher on the 2 to 5 rep range, things get more complicated. First, in a study from 2016 that compared an equal number of sets with 2 to 4 reps versus 8 to 12 reps, they found significant differences favoring the 8 to 12 rep range. So this again looks like the 2 to 4 reps cannot produce similar hypertrophy gains with a moderate rep range. However, in contrast to these findings, another study from 2015 that compared 4 sets of either 3 to 5 reps or 10 to 12 reps found similar hypertrophy gains. One difference between this study and the previous one is that they trained with slightly higher repetitions of 3 to 5 reps instead of 2 to 4 reps. Another difference is that the second study had larger intervals in the high load group. And this is something more realistic since we know that training within the range of 1 to 5 reps needs more rest to recover between sets than training within the range of 10 to 12 reps. In the previous study, the rest was the same and the results favored the moderate load. This might have played an important role. In addition, these two studies compared same number of sets with different rep ranges. However, in other studies that tried to equate volume load between conditions, the results were more consensus. First, let me explain what is volume load. Volume load is the result of reps times sets times weight. So 12 reps for 3 sets with 40 kilos equals 1440 kilos volume load. In contrast, 4 reps for 3 sets with 53 kilos equals 636 kilos volume load. To make these two even, we need to do around 7 sets on the 4 rep condition. Recent literature suggests that volume load is not important for muscle hypertrophy. However, by equating volume load between conditions, we make sure that we exclude one of the parameters that could interfere with the results of the study. So let's see studies that equated volume load between conditions. In these 4 studies, authors compared 3 to 5 reps with moderate loads between 8 to 20 reps. In all 4 studies, investigators equated volume load between conditions by doing more sets on the high load conditions. Surprisingly, all the studies found similar hypertrophy gains between high and moderate loads. So you could potentially stimulate muscle growth with 3 to 5 reps if you're willing to do more sets. That's because it seems that loads from 3 to 5 reps are less effective per set for muscle hypertrophy. So if I were to give you a bro certified example to get the best idea out of it, 2 sets of 12 reps are probably equally effective for hypertrophy as 3 to 4 sets of 3 to 5 reps. However, this increases by a lot the duration of your training session. In the 2014 study that I previously presented, it took the moderate group to finish each exercise of the workout around 5 minutes, while the high load group needed around 20 minutes to finish each exercise. So they need around 4 times more time to produce the same results in muscle hypertrophy. And in real training situations, this could be a lot worse. In this study, they only trained a few muscle groups for a few sets per session. In a full body training program with 10 muscle groups trained for 15 sets per week, it would take 6 sessions of around 45 minutes on the 8 to 12 rep range. But if you need double the sets and double the rest intervals to produce the same results with 3 to 5 reps, this would result in around 6 sessions of 2 hours per session. Of course, this wouldn't be possible, and you can definitely not use this rep range as your sole practice to build muscle. Apart from the fact that they are time consuming, training with 3 to 5 reps for muscle hypertrophy has also the following problems. 1. Training with such high loads leads to increased joint pain and risk of injury. As was reported in the study by Schoenfeld that I mentioned earlier, the high load group experienced more joint pain and also had injuries that forced 2 participants to drop out. In the same group, participants regularly felt beat up and tired. In contrast, the 10 rep group reported they felt capable of doing much more volume had they been allowed. 2. Training with 3 to 5 reps is better for strength, but if your only consideration is hypertrophy, your maximum strength isn't a concern. Progressive overload in terms of intensity isn't necessary for hypertrophy, but even if it was, training within the range of 8 to 12 reps will definitely increase your strength too. 3. You cannot use these rep ranges in many muscle groups and exercises like the crunches, lateral raises, cable row, calf raises, and so on. And 4. Training with such high loads is 100% not recommended for people with low experience at the gym. So a safe conclusion for the rep range below 5 is the following. All the data on reps 1 and 2 show less hypertrophy gains compared to moderate reps. From 3 to 5 reps, the evidence shows that you could achieve similar hypertrophy gains with moderate repetitions, but you need to accumulate more sets per session. However, there is a time and a place to use this rep range, but it depends on the 9 factors that affect rep range selection, which I'll present later on this video. So we are left with the 6 to around 20 rep range, and many will think that a combination of reps within that range will probably work better for hypertrophy. Although this theory has a compelling theoretical base that I like myself, science says differently. More specifically, the studies of Schoenfeld, Souza, and Fink found that a combination of rep ranges wasn't superior than steady repetitions specifically for muscle growth. Nevertheless, based on all the data that we know today, and according to your goal, it seems that there is an ideal rep range for each one individually. And based on the 9 factors that affect rep ranges, it makes sense to combine a different number of reps within that range to serve different aspects of your individual needs. But what is the ideal rep range for you? Well, you can answer that with the 9 factors that affect rep range selection. So let's see them. Number 1. What is your goal? Is your goal only hypertrophy, or is it hypertrophy and strength, or hypertrophy and strength endurance? This highly determines the rep range that should be the focus of your efforts. So based on what we know today, it's reasonable to work between 8 to 16 reps for hypertrophy, 6 to 12 reps for hypertrophy and strength, and 14 to 20 reps for hypertrophy and strength endurance. This of course doesn't mean that you should never train out of these rep ranges. However, it does mean that you don't have much reason to train out of these rep ranges in the first place if you keep the same goal. Now, whether you're going to use the higher or the lower repetitions of these ranges depends also on the following 8 factors. Number 2. Do you have training experience? The less experience you have, the more it is advised to work with lower loads and thus with higher reps. By doing so, you give the time to your body to adjust to the movements, learn the techniques, and keep the risk of injuries low. So depending on your goal, it's probably best to be close to the upper range if you don't have much training experience. Number 3. What type of exercises are involved in your program? In general, it's better to use the lower repetition range for heavy compound movements and use the upper range for isolated exercises. In addition, some exercises don't work well with higher loads like the crunches and the lateral raises. So keep in mind that the exercise type affects the optimal rep range at which you can work. Number 4. What level of coordination, aka muscle-mind connection, do you have on the exercise you chose? Anyone can flex their biceps, but how many can do the same thing with their lats or their lower trapezius? For exercises that you don't yet control well, it's better to be on the higher reps of your range and keep the lower reps for exercises that you have a better muscle-mind connection. For example, I can activate my biceps very well, but every time I go heavier on the calves, it just doesn't work for me. I have a hard time activating and really feeling the muscles working properly. For this reason, I always train with less load on the calves. Number 5. Which muscles or exercises are more important for you? The exercises that you want to develop more should be placed at the beginning of your workout. At that time, you're more focused and can concentrate better on the task at hand. However, you cannot train with high reps at the beginning of your session and expect to have energy for the rest of your workout. The proper order is to start with lower reps that are less metabolically taxing and keep the high volume sets for the end. This of course doesn't change much if you train only with around 12 reps. But if you train with a range of repetitions from 8 to 16, the exercises that you'll put at the beginning of your workout make more sense to be also the lower reps of your program. Number 6. How much time can you spend on each workout? Time efficiency is one of the most important factors for many of us. Taking also under consideration the previous factors, you should make an effort to stay closer to the lower ranges in some or most of your exercises to keep the program shorter. That is, if you are in a hurry. Number 7. Do you suffer any injuries? No matter your goal, you should shift to low loads, high reps on the joints and muscles that you are injured, at least until you get better. Number 8. Think about what works best for your individual characteristics. Remember that science speaks in averages. This means that in a study, if 18 out of 20 people get better results with 12 reps and 2 out of 20 people get better results with 16 reps, the results of this study would be that 12 reps are better for muscle growth. But what if you are one of those 2 people that saw better results with 16 reps? This is one of the hardest things to understand when it comes to science. For you as an individual, the best strategy is to start with what is proposed from the studies and then monitor your progress and make adjustments within the proposed guidelines. Sooner or later, you'll know exactly what works best for you. And the last factor, number 9, do you like what you do? When it comes to training, the most important thing is to make sure that you can stick with your program for long enough. So if you alternate the repetitions and sets in a non-scientific way, but this lets you enjoy your workouts more and stay longer at the gym, then this is definitely something that works for you. Science gives us the best recommendations. The way that we apply them is through the art of coaching. To understand better how these 9 factors could work for you, I'm going to give you an example on how to use them. So let's say that Yiannis has as a goal hypertrophy and strength. He has 1 year of training experience and his program has both compound movements and isolated exercises. He has a good level of coordination in most muscles but not on the lats. It seems that he cannot activate them well. One of his priorities is to get stronger at the squats and also wants to focus on growing his biceps. He has a fair amount of time to train but not unlimited, and he has an injury on his shoulder. Now let's see how all these individual characteristics form the rep range he should work with. He should train within the range of 6 to 12 reps. With 1 year of experience, he could train all the way to 6 repetitions in exercises that he can perform with good technique. His compound lifts should be on the lower range to avoid cardiovascular fatigue and the isolated movements of his workout on the higher reps of that range. He can train with any rep range in most muscle groups, but specifically on the lats that he has poor muscle-mind connection, he should focus only on the upper 12 reps range. Since he wants to focus on the squat and the biceps, he should move both of these exercises closer to the start of his workout. So the squat can be the first of the compound heavy lifts and the biceps the first of the isolated exercises with the more moderate reps. And since he has an adequate amount of time, he doesn't care much about the rep range on that part. However, by training with 8 instead of 6 reps on some of his compound lifts, he could need shorter rest intervals to recover between sets, and this might save him up to 10 minutes by the end of his workout. He also has an injury on the shoulder, so only on the shoulder exercises he should train with very low loads for more than 16 reps, so out of his ideal range until he gets better. He keeps track of his progress and will make adjustments if for any reason this doesn't work for him. However, he won't make much progress if he doesn't train with the right intensity of effort in each set. So how close to failure should he train in each set to get the optimal results? You can learn by watching this next video.